I'm interested in primal spirituality. Primal spirituality. We actually have courses in primal spirituality here at Sunrise Ranch. And what is it? The word primal might make you think of something primitive, but that's not really what the word means. The word primal is from Latin, prime. It simply means first. First, spirituality. Original spirituality. It is the truth behind all the faiths in the world. At the root of it, it is what the founder of those true faiths knew. And it is the truth behind us. What we were born into the world with. It is our first spirituality. Not the one we were taught, if we were taught one, but the one we were born with, the one that we all have, and in fact that we share in common. Primal spirituality. If you look at what happened after some of the great faith leaders brought to the world a knowing, what came after was some kind of process through which what they knew got taught as some kind of doctrine, dogma, something to be followed by rote practice, but a process by which many of the followers didn't come to know the original spirituality, the primal spirituality of the original founder of the faith. All true faiths sought to bring an end to human superstition. It was rampant in the ancient world. It's rampant in the world today as well. And what is superstition? It's believing in powers that you're not a part of, that you cannot see, that affect your life profoundly. And so, as a weak human being who doesn't control their own fate, because your fate is being determined by these entities that you cannot see, you're then in the position of placating those entities, trying to figure out, trying to discern what they're up to. So all the world's great faith traditions sought to bring people out of superstition. We have what we call the Holy Bible. You've got an old part and a new part. The old part is very similar to the Hebrew Bible. The new part contains the story of Jesus' ministry and what came after. The whole story is a story of people coming out of superstition. Or at least trying to. Their leaders trying to take them out of superstition. Superstition in the ancient world led to terrible things. Child sacrifice. Child sacrifice was rampant across the world. Virtually all the continents and peoples of the world at some time practiced some form of child sacrifice. It was rampant in the days of the Bible. The Bible is the story of people coming away from that practice and all the superstitious practices that filled the day. Have we as a culture emerged out of superstition? Probably not. There are certainly evidences of superstition, despite the best efforts of people like Abraham in the Bible and Moses and Jesus himself, who did all they knew how to do to bring people out of an experience of superstition into something else. And what was the something else they sought to bring people to? What is the antidote to superstition? You might say it's knowledge. Knowledge. Another word for it would be truth. The scientific revolution attempted to take people away from superstition to a more practical, scientific approach to life. And so the study of the physical sciences and the development of the scientific method really assisted Western culture and then world culture to move out of superstition, to become wise, eventually to help us get our hands on technology, brought us to the current day where we have knowledge of a sort. We have computers with storage devices that can carry unthinkable amounts of information. And then we've developed artificial intelligence that can access that information. But has that brought us as a human family into a place of knowing truth, of truly being wise? There's no telling where artificial intelligence, it's a rather self-flattering word, isn't it? But where artificial intelligence will take us, or where human technology will take us. There's no guarantee within science that it will go to a good place. And more we're discovering that the scientific method and the development of science didn't really give us knowledge about what it means to be a human being. It didn't give us the power to bring peace on earth. It didn't give us power to be together as a human family or as a nuclear family. It didn't take away our loneliness, maybe added to it. It didn't make us live in concert with the natural world in which we live. And it didn't empower us as a human being to create. So most of us love technology and probably love science. We're on our iPhones and everything else. Certainly those things are a tool for something, but not a substitute for something else, which is knowing the truth, whatever that is. So Jesus, who sought to bring people out of superstition, had this a very amazing saying, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So despite what the sutra says, there's a discussion of freedom. The freedom to do what? Set you free. Well, we could think of being free from things, free of involuntary servitude, free from persecution. Our Bill of Rights in America talks about our freedom to do things, our right to do things, our right to assemble, our right of free speech, our right of the practice of the religion of our choice. So possibly what Jesus was speaking of, this freedom he was speaking of, related to those things or included them. I want to suggest a larger freedom that would include all those things and far more, perhaps hinted at by the sutra. It is the freedom to create. And you shall know the truth. And that knowing will set you free to create. It's hard to create if you don't know. If you don't see and understand the world in which you live. If you don't know what's behind that world, what created it. If you don't know the powers of creation that are behind it and that are behind yourself and behind other people. If you don't know the truth of another person, how could you be of service to them? How could you live a fulfilled life yourself if you do not know who you are? And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free to create, to be a creator. So how do we know? How do we know? As we are considering what it means to truly listen to the heartbeat of creation, I was thinking of stories I read as a child of the Native Americans of the Great Plains of the United States. And I haven't researched it recently to know if it's true or not, but what I read as a kid was that they would put their ear to the ground so that they could hear the herds of buffalo when they were near. It's for me, a provocative image, a Native American with their ear to the ground. I think it is a metaphor for how we come to know. In this case, the truth of whether the buffalo were near. We listen. We listen. We put our ear to the ground. We look for signs. We open ourselves to receive the truth that is all around us. The whole world is telling us who it is and what it is. People are telling us who they are. So we have our ear to the ground. We open our eyes in the world in which we live so that we can know the truth. So that we can't be fooled by the judgments of other people. Oh, this person is that. This is what's happening over here. Or even our self-judgment. Or a judgment of other people. No, we're actually listening, we're seeing, we're hearing, we're understanding. We're also listening to the heartbeat of creation. That is, however you want to say it, within us, above us, all around us. The heartbeat of creation, the pattern of creation, the voice of creation that is speaking to us. We are listening. We have our ear to the heaven. And not only our ears, because obviously this isn't especially an exercise of the physical senses. We have the ear of the heart to the heaven. My heart is listening. My heart is listening to the Creator of all, to the self, the one self that I'm a part of. And my mind is open. The scientific revolution was in many ways a celebration of the mind, was it not? It's like, stop all this fear of the heart and exercise your rational mind. I think it provided some benefit, really, probably to world culture. But are we supposed to be just biological computers? Is that how the thinking process, is that how consciousness is supposed to work? Is that how we truly know? Do you know God, the creator, the cosmos, because your mind is cranking it out? The truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. The truth of what? I don't think it's reasonable to expect that we will know the truth of everything, right? I don't think we're necessarily going to know the chemical composition of the furthest star. The truth that we are here to know is the truth that is relevant to the world in which we live. I don't know that we'd want our minds cluttered with all the rest of it anyway. And how do we know that truth? We can't just know it with our minds. Our minds are not capable of receiving that truth. Not all alone. But when the heart is listening, the ear of the heart is open, then the vibration of creation begins to come through us. Om comes through us. And then the intelligence of the universe moves us, lights us up, tells us who we are as a creator and what is being created now and what wants to be created through us and in our world. It gives us the pattern of creation, which is emerging in the world in which we live and then reverberating through us. We know. This has all kinds of implications for us as a human being and for the human family. I was thinking of this relative to energy medicine. Do you think it's relevant to energy medicine and the process of attunement? What happens when the practitioner is listening? They're listening to the heartbeat of creation within themselves and feeling that vibration through themselves. And they are listening to the person who is there with them, seeing them, hearing them, knowing the pattern of creation relative to them, knowing them as a unique being, knowing them as a part of the one self, as one is oneself. In that process, there is what might seem like magic, superstition, except that the practitioner has the opportunity not to have some magical force from who knows where channeled into the room, but to be a living embodiment of the powers of creation, knowing creation, and in that act of knowing those patterns, in the act of knowing oneself and that person in front of you, you're endowed with the powers of creation to reshape the pattern of what is emerging in that space. I know that because I have experienced it. It's not a superstitious belief, not a faith that I'm trying to believe, an actual experience. Because if you know the truth does set you free to create. And so it is in every field in which we function. And so it is for us as a human family and for our planet. For that to be realized by us as a human family, certainly there needs to be those who come And do not settle for an unknowing superstition on the one hand, or simply for expertise in the physical sciences and the rational mind on the other. There is a spirituality for today that doesn't shun science, but knows that there's far more to science than has yet been discovered. And that science and the use of the rational mind should only encourage us to open up the human heart and use our emotional body for the purpose for which it was designed, to carry the heartbeat of creation, to sense and know intuitively and empathically other people and the world in which we live. Only then are we truly wise. Can we act with wisdom as a creator, not making a total wreck of things through science alone, which we've done over and over and over again. This is our primal spirituality, our first spirituality, and it is the spirituality that's called for today. In that sense, it's Alpha and Omega. The answer, as it always has been, I had reason to recall my Sunday school in the Unitarian church in which I grew up. And there was a Sunday school teacher, Olivia Vlejos, and she taught us the Old Testament. And this was in a Unitarian church that wasn't particularly high on the Bible, very humanistic in its approach to things, as Unitarians are wont to be. But anyway, she taught us the Old Testament stories, and I remember being so frustrated, because if you listen to the stories, they get to a certain point, and then there's all kinds of backsliding, and they just slip back into their superstitious ways. And I remember as a kid thinking, this is darn frustrating listening to this story. But the truth is, in the story, it was a hard slog. It was a hard slog. The people around them were constantly seducing the children of Israel into their superstitious practices, which, as I say, included child sacrifice. Most people don't know that about the Old Testament. It's blatantly there in the Bible. Blatantly. Of course, they weren't the only ones. There were forms of it around the world. But it was a hard slog to come out of those superstitious patterns and into a spiritual knowing. And in the Old Testament, they got as far as they could. Jesus had about 3 years of it before the superstitions of the day closed him down. It's a hard slog. But just because it hasn't come to a place of fulfillment in the world, whether it's through Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, or any other faith tradition, doesn't mean that this that we're speaking of here this morning is not the pivotal issue for humanity. And the only answer to the problems that we face, unless you think you have another one, unless you think that AI is going to figure it all out. You'd end up with artificial ignorance and disinformation very easily. Something different happens when the Creator shows up through human beings, as human beings, when the Self is known. As that sutra so beautifully spoke to. That is what we're here for, to know that, to bring that to the world. Bring the powers of creation, the power of love, which is the power of creation, to the world. To bring the truth of what it means to be a human being to the world. The truth of who we are as a human family. The truth of this beautiful planet For those of us who live in this valley, it's remarkable. It should wake us up to something, I think. The other day, I walked down the road here. Walking down the road, there are about 100 elk sitting over in the field on one side. This is in the early hours of the morning, and the morning mist is still lifting. On the other side, there's a herd of about 15 deer prancing around. There are turkeys going through the valley. Yesterday, there was a red fox in the pasture just on the other side of my backyard. And the dog is tied up in the backyard, and the fox is looking. He heard the dog bark, but my dog is about 15 pounds, so that didn't scare the fox. And the fox was curious. He's looking at the dog. He's looking at me. I come out with my camera, and the fox is still looking around. We live in a natural zoo here. And so it is all over the world. There's just the remarkable nature of this planet that we live upon. And we're reminded of it all the time if we have eyes to see. But we won't have eyes to see unless we have a heart to see and know and love and appreciate, which is, after all, what the Creator does.